Hello, fitness business nerds. What's up? Welcome to another episode of the Business for Unicorns podcast. Today I'm here with my good friend and longtime Unicorn Society member, owner of the Fit Lab in New Jersey, Greg Morrone. What's up, my friend?
Hey, Michael, how are you? Thanks for having me.
Oh my gosh, thanks for doing this. I'm so excited for us to chat on the podcast and for people to get to hear your brilliance, for people to get all your wisdom. um, Remind me, how long have you been a Unicorn Society member now?
4 years since early 2018.
Amazing, amazing. Well, I'm so excited. We've had so many fun ups and downs in our businesses over those years that we've shared with each other. And today we honed in on a topic I think that a lot of our listeners are going to find really valuable. Really, the big picture conversation we're going to have today is about finding the right business model for your gym. And for many years, you did one-on-one private training and then switched to now kind of a semi-private or small group personal training model, kind of 6-on-1. And I thought it would be fun to share that conversation with our listeners so they can kind of hear your thought process for how you decided, why you made the switch, how you made the switch. And I think it's going to be really valuable for all of our listeners. So thank you for agreeing to do this.
Sure.
For starters, just give people a layout of, what the Fit Lab is, what one-on-one training looked like for all those years that you did it. Lay the groundwork of the before times before you made the change.
Sure. So we've been open for almost 10 years. And when we first opened up, I think like many business owners, I was doing all things. I had one other coach working with me, but I was doing the majority of the training sessions myself, in addition to the admin work and whatever advertising and marketing I could cobble together at the time. So I was burning the candle at both ends myself, trying to do all of the things at the same time. And at the time, personal training was the way to go, right? Our venue is so small that group fitness, the type that is 7 to 12 people, just wasn't a viable option. It's also something I had never done before. My background before opening the gym was 13 years doing one-on-one training in Manhattan, in-house at private equity firms and private training studios. So that's all I knew. And then once I opened the Fit Lab, and we had been going for a couple of years, and I was able to hire more people, we kept filling all of the times between 5 a.m. and 10 p.m. at night. And that necessitated the change to 6-on-1 so that we could accommodate more people. We can extend a service that was more affordable, that was easier for members to schedule, and allowed us to make more money without working more hours. So it turned out to be a really great fit. And it's a model that I had heard the Cosgroves talking about since probably 2006 or 7. Yeah. And it just wasn't very popular in our area when we started it 6 years ago. But it really seems to be gaining a lot of traction, a lot of boutique fitness studios.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so I wonder if you can kind of circle back and maybe go back through, you mentioned these kind of high level, but go back and slow down and go through the parts of your decision-making process as you were thinking about it. So clearly you like one-on-one. Your clients probably liked one-on-one. You probably attracted a lot of people who thought that's all they ever wanted at a gym is one-on-one.
Right.
And so, right. And so at what point were you starting to think, hey, we might need to change this model? You mentioned a little bit of like some scheduling issues. You were so busy during prime time, you couldn't fit any more people. But talk to me, what other factors went into your decision to change from something that had been working to something new?
Well, scheduling was a major factor, right? Because so many people want to do 7 a.m. So many people want to do 6 p.m. And it didn't feel great when someone canceled at one of those prime time spots. And then as a coach, you're just sitting there for an hour when 5 other members would have happily jumped in on that time slot if they had enough notice. So that really started to push me in that direction of how can we don't have the space, so we can't do 4 trainers with 4 PT sessions at the same time. How can we just work more efficiently? And this seems like the best route to go. As you know, change inherently scares most of us.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a little bit nerve-wracking to figure out how to phrase this to the members who all they knew was one-on-one personal training.
Yeah, for sure.
So it took a little while for me to start laying the groundwork, teaching people what it looked like, pitching the benefits of training alongside like-minded people, and I think it took about 4 to 5 months for me to fully rip the Band-Aid off and dedicate all of our peak hours to the 6-on-1 training. Now, keep in mind, we still do one-on-one training, but it's only during what's considered off-peak gym hours.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Yeah, and you're so right. I mean, whenever we make big sweeping changes like this to our model, it affects our whole community. And so there's going to be a long period of time where you have to communicate the reasons for the change, the reasons it's going to be better for everyone, how it's going to work. So can you maybe just break that down into the two groups? Like, how do you communicate it to your team, and how do you communicate it to your clients? Like, what did that process for both those audiences look like for you?
Well, communicating it to the team's pretty easy, because all the trainers that I know, God bless them, they want to make more money without working more hours,
Yep.
right? And so
it's an easy pitch.
yes, this is going to scratch both those itches for you, because you'll also be making money more efficiently, right? So that wasn't a hard sell. With some of the members, it did take a little while because it wasn't being done at other gyms. It's not something that they had really heard about or seen. They still thought of small group personal training as classes.
Mm-hmm.
And what do classes look like in the average person's mind at that time was CrossFit, Orange Theory, high intensity, a lot of burpees, that sort of thing. And I really positioned them like, hey, no, this is going to be high value personal training. I am going to keep notes on the weight that you're using, any injuries that you have, and we're going to modify each exercise to meet you where you're at in your fitness journey. So please know that we're going to take good care of you. You're going to save money. You can now schedule your sessions directly through an app. You're not beholden to the same training days and times every week. So when inevitably work conflicts come up, cool. It'll be very easy for you to schedule a different day and time so that you're able to remain consistent with your training days. And really that consistency is going to serve your fitness and health goals. So it took a little while. And again, we always make things seem harder. In our brain, we're making them a lot harder than it's actually going to be. We might have had an attrition of 1 to 2 people who stopped coming in, but I think the overwhelming majority of members were pleasantly surprised. And it's just more fun. You don't have to talk to me and look at just this for an hour anymore. Now you have it's a lot more fun training with people of all different ages and levels of ability. And the sessions just were a lot more interesting to the members who had been doing one-on-one for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great explanation, and it's really well said, my friend. I think, as you said, with the trainers, it's kind of an easy sell. Hey, do you want to make more money without working more hours? Yes. Great, let's do it. Right. With the clients, there's it's really an exercise in persuasion, right? It's a sales conversation, right? Of like, let me explain to you all the benefits and features of this new way of doing it, and we slowly are going to move to it, teach you how to interact with us in this new, different way. And as you mentioned, so many people that I know you talk to a lot of Unicorn Society members about this switch as well, and certainly I have, and many of them get so nervous, thinking, oh my God, if I make a change to my model, I'm going to lose everyone, and the reality is that no one does if they do it well, right? Yes. And you're like, you lost maybe 1 or 2 people, right? And that's that's the cost of change. And you probably, are much more efficient, and we can talk about the upside, of course, but there's so many positives about making this change that totally outweigh the 1 or 2 people that might be leaving. The one piece about the team I want to touch on for a second is I know that a lot of trainers there's an adjustment period from one on if they're used to working one-on-one. That's a certain pulse, that's a
Sure.
certain kind of cadence, a certain kind of way of coaching you can get away with. When you're one-on-one, it's very detailed. There's a lot of conversation you have to make. And when you're doing
Right.
six-on-one, there's adjustment trainers have to make to have their eyes on six people at a time, change the way they cue, change maybe the energy they're even bringing to a room. Can you talk a
Sure.
little bit about how you help coaches who are not used to six-on-one get used to it and adapt some of those new skills?
Sure. It would be like having one friend over to your house to have lunch with you one day versus having a dinner party,
Yep.
right? And so you're really checking off all the boxes of being a good host. Is the space clean? Is the music playing and right? As people come through the door, are you greeting them by name? Throughout the course of dinner, are you making sure to engage and interact with each person at your dinner party? And just just basic social etiquette
Yeah.
goes a long way, even in providing this type of service. So I know that at MFF you have in session protocols, and we utilize many of the same things, saying people's names X amount of times, physically giving two finger touches for tactile cues to each member X amount of times, and just having a mental checklist that you're engaging with each individual throughout the hour, right? So we have SOPs written up for when people walk in during the session, and then at the end of the session, which is as simple as like, hey, Steve, Joanne, when are you in next? And just making sure that you are obviously saying goodbye, saying good job,
Mm-hmm.
or thanking them for trusting you with their fitness and health, and then also creating a little bit of accountability as they're walking out the door. So yes, our sessions, how we run them, have evolved for sure over the 6 years that we've been doing it. But again, I think a lot of it just boils down to just what would you do if you were hosting six people at your house?
Yeah, I think it's a great analogy. There's two pieces of it that I'm hearing. One is just like being a great host, just preparing for people to come over for dinner, right? It's a great way of thinking
Right.
about, is the room ready? Am I prepared? And the second piece of it is a little bit like a plate spinning exercise. Is that, once a dinner party's in full swing, you have to kind of keep the conversation going, keep the hot food hot, keep the cold food cold. And in the
Right.
session, there's a bunch of standards that you've created to make sure people are using names, giving good coaching cues. Everyone's getting attention. I'll say that, you
Right.
probably heard this from Mark in the past as well, but at MFF, one of the biggest challenges, I should say this, I'll call it complaints. I'll call it what it is. One of the biggest complaints that we've gotten from clients, aka ninjas over the years, is that in group settings, they complain they don't get enough attention. Right? When new people
Right.
come in, new people will get more attention. Or if I've been around for a long time, trainers assume that I don't need any help anymore. I don't need any encouragement anymore. And so I think you pointed out a lot of great SOPs, a lot of great standards that you want to make sure the team is on top of to make sure that everyone is getting attention, that everyone is getting a
Right.
touch point, everyone feels seen and like they belong and like they're improving on a regular basis. I think that's so key for a group training model because again, it's the number one
Sure.
complaint we've gotten is that people just feel
Sure.
kind of like they fade into the background over time. Yeah.
And it's a tricky thing. People, members have different wants and needs, right? There's the people who have been loyal to you for years,
Mm-hmm.
where they can do the exercises with the technique that you're looking for. They're pretty self-sufficient
Yeah.
at that point, but they still want the
They're
attention,
still
and you
paying the
need to
same
figure
amount as the new people.
exactly.
you know.
And yeah, and then the new people, we have very high coaching standards. So we won't turn a blind eye to a person doing an exercise that could potentially create a little inflammation or injury over time. So if a person's really struggling, our coaches are going to tend to kind of hang out by them
Mm-hmm.
for the majority of the session to make sure that they're learning. And in a small space, some of the people listening to this have pretty intimate spaces. the new person, although you're trying to help them and give them the coaching that they need to get up to speed, they might feel a little bit awkward because you are in a small space and everyone's hyper aware of every little thing that's going on.
Yeah, of course.
So again, it goes back to how do I manage this? Like I want this new person to do well and feel supported and do the exercises correctly. I also don't want them, to feel like they're struggling and that all of my attention is on them.
Yeah, 100%.
So you have to work the room.
Yeah, 100%.
Right?
It's really an art form that I think, trainers who are not used to this model take a little while to get used to it, right? They have to build up the capacity to be really great in this model. But when they can be, I think it creates just as good of an experience as one-on-one. Right, to all the points you mentioned. I want to zoom back out for a second because you mentioned these a little bit here and there, but I want to maybe just put a finer point on it, which is, what are all the benefits you've seen by making this switch? And I want to make it clear to all our listeners, we're not doing this podcast because I think everyone out there doing one-on-one should switch to small group, right? I think many of you probably should, but this is not a commercial for switching, but I want to make sure it's clear that people hear all the benefits you've gotten from switching your model in a way that works for your space. So what are all the things that are better because you made this switch?
Again, a lot less time and energy dedicated to scheduling. Our bottom line profit has gone up because a mistake that I made that a lot of other gym owners make, when you first open up, you overpay your coaches. Yep. And I mean that lovingly. Yeah. I just didn't factor things in like, I don't know, taxes and that, know, so, and realize how much less money I would be taking home, and how for the sake of trying to be as fair as possible. But there was also some serious insecurities when I opened, like, hey, what can I teach these people? What can I offer them? I know I'll overpay them. And so when we were doing just personal training, my bottom line wasn't where it needed to be. And when we switched to the small groups, I do pay the coaches per head, so they make out very well during that model. But I also factored in taxes and all the other expenses of running a gym. So my bottom line profit, in addition to gross revenue being higher, our bottom line profit is also much better because it's a better distribution of the revenue. So that was huge. Yeah. So, and then as far as the members go, I think our retention is even higher than it was before. We hover somewhere between 95 and 98% retention on a monthly basis. And the a little secret about the 6-on-1 is that the reality is it's harder for a member to leave training with other people. Yeah. They're not just leaving Greg or Jason or any one of the coaches that they've been spending time with. Now they have a little community that they've actually gotten to know a little bit and they've actually gotten to like. And for a lot of folks, especially if they have a family, this is kind of their social time throughout the week between work and family responsibilities. Spending 2 to 3 hours with the same 4 to 8 people week in and week out, you do grow a little bit attached, and it makes them, quite frankly, it just makes it harder for them to leave, which is great for us.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, we know one of the reasons people stay at gyms is because there's a community. The more friends they make, the more likely they are to stay. And I think this model really helps facilitate that in a way that, one-on-one just makes it almost impossible to make friends. Right? And so not only is there more gross revenue, there's more profit. There's people who are staying just as long as before, if not longer, is huge. And trainers making more money per hour, the potential to make more money per hour. So there's really a lot of benefits to switching this model, which is why I think we've seen a lot of people do it.
Hi, it's Mark. Super brief break in the action to remind you to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. If you enjoy this podcast, this is super helpful for us. It helps spread the word so we can spend even more time and more resources creating the best possible fitness business podcast in all the land. Now back to the show.
So, for people who are on the listening to the podcast right now and thinking, you know what, I have done a lot of one-on-one. Maybe I should move to some sort of small group or semi-private training. What's your advice for them? Having gone through it yourself, having helped a lot of other people make this switch, what kind of advice do you have for people thinking about it?
I think the switch from one-on-one to small groups is an easier sell. In my experience of talking to other gym owners, because I think the people who are really going to push back on this model are the ones who do quote unquote semi-private. And my definition of semi-private is it's a couple of people training at the same time. One coach typically is policing that 3 to 4 people, but each member has their own program that they're working out, that they're doing. So everyone's doing something different, and then the coach is just policing technique and walking around the room and giving little cues to each member. So I think that the people who use that model are pretty attached to their programming, and that things have to be this way because this is the best way to do it, right? My program for each individual needs their unicorn program in order for it to be most effective. So I think, and that's hard to talk to some of those folks into making changes, right? Because they tend to be very smart when it comes to exercise science and biomechanics. And if they don't want to make more money and get some of their time back, then it might be hard to convince them to make this change. The way that we do our small groups as far as programming, which we do progress and regress, and there's up to 4 different versions of a squat happening at the same time. But what I think is really great about having everyone doing generally the same thing at the same time is the shared experience. And it just deepens the roots of community, right? So in the second circuit, if you're doing something especially challenging that involves the air bike or the rower or Versa climber, that shared suck where everyone can, look at the coach and curse us out, then there's a bonding that happens there that is very important for retention, and that's why I really like that model. And you save a ton of time on programming, which again, the older you get, the longer you've been in the business, the more you think about scaling, the more you realize you're going to have to edit yourself and your business more and more and more.
Yeah, 100%. I think that's really well said. I think, oftentimes making the switch is about explaining how what the workouts will look like, how they'll be similar, how they'll be different. And I know one of the pieces of language that we use at MFF when we moved from 3-on-1 semi-private training to 6-on-1 small group personal training was we stopped talking about individualized programs, and we started talking about individualized coaching. Right, that the programs can be shared. Right. Everyone can be doing about the same kind of exercise, about the same kind of workout. Different versions of it, perhaps, but everyone's going to be squatting, pushing, pulling at the same time. And we started using that language of individualized coaching, meaning in the moment, the coaches will help you all as individuals, and we will do progressions and regressions as needed in the moment. And that language, I think, seemed to stick. I think it was part of the messaging, like you're saying, that worked for you, that also worked for us. So I think it's probably a good takeaway for our listeners there that if you're looking to make this switch, or something about how you describe what the experience is, how it's going to be different, how it's going to be similar, and how in many cases you're still going to get the same kind of individualized experience. It's just going to look a little different.
Right. And we really need to do a good job of using that language on our website, in our marketing campaigns, on the consultation call, during strategy sessions. You have to reinforce this stuff right from Jump Street, so that they start to understand the value of it. Again, a lot of people might not be familiar with this model yet. I do think that is going to change societally over the next 2 to 3 years. But right now, they might not know what this is. So you have to hit the same notes throughout the process of getting them into that
Yeah,
first
well
session.
said. Yeah. I mean, hell, our industry doesn't even call the same stuff, right? Even amongst us.
Right.
People, I know people that call, 3-on-1
Right.
small group, or, you get the idea. We don't even have the same language amongst ourselves. So I think that's a really important point is
Right.
to, whenever you decide what your angle is for your clients, you got to be really consistent in your language and how you deliver it, because you have to educate them. They don't know, they don't know what each model means. In fact, as an industry, we don't have very clear definitions.
That's classic.
Yes, we're
fitness
young.
industry.
We're young. We're still figuring it out. So, is there anything else about this change that I haven't asked you that you wanted to share? Is there anything else about this model or advice you have that I didn't ask you about?
No, I just strongly encourage people to consider it in the name of efficiency and bottom line profit. I also, I mean that's really the gist of it. It's going to make your life a little bit easier. I do have two quick things to say. People need to really figure out how much they're going to charge for this service, right? I think give or take 5 percentage points in either direction, pricing it around 40% of what the average one-on-one training is going for in the area of your gym. I think right around there is a good price point monthly. And the other thing is, this can't just be a smaller version of group fitness. You do have to make it closer to personal training. The way that we do things is we just use Slack, and we create a channel for every single member that gets updated with notes every time a member comes in. So we know if their low back is bothering them, if their knee is bothering them, what kind of weights they're using. So you do need to make sure that you are making it as close to personal training as possible by really paying attention and modifying the workout, knowing what's going on in a member's life to bring up, right? Because this isn't going to be all the same coach seeing people all the time. It's going to be a handful of coaches working with this pool of members. So you really need to be on the same page to ensure that you're justifying your price point and being true to the language that you and I just spoke about that starts during our advertising on our website. So we really need to do a good job of trying to make it closer to personal training and not have the what people think of as group fitness when they're looking at this product, because if they're thinking group fitness, they're like, why am I paying $400 a month when I could go to F45 for $100? So do a very good job of justifying your price point once you figure out what that price point
those are
should be.
two great bonus tips, my friend. I think how to price it makes a lot of sense. I think it's a great guideline, and also making sure that you really are trying to position this as a comparison to personal training and not to group, because the price point will make more sense and be more favorable that way. So yeah, fantastic. Let's end there. Great tips. How do people learn more about you or the Fit Lab on the internet? Where can they find you?
Just Google search the Fit Lab Hoboken. We do some social media stuff, but you can message me through there. You can email me. I love talking the business of fitness, so people can feel free to reach out to me. But just know I am going to engage, and I am going to engage passionately. So if you reach out.
And what's the best email for that?
The FitLab Inc. at Gmail is my personal.
Awesome.
And that's fine.
Well, thank you so much for doing this, my friend. It was, I think, a really great conversation, and I think will help a lot of people if they're considering a switch. And even if they're not, I think there's some great tips in there about how to communicate with team, how to communicate with clients. So thank you so much for doing this. I really appreciate it.
No, it was awesome seeing you, and I love doing it.
We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
Before you go, one final note. If you haven't checked out my YouTube channel yet, head to markfisheryoutube.com. I post videos twice per week and I cover all sorts of topics and tips to help you be even more successful at running a training gym. From time management to financial benchmarks to lead generation strategies, I have got you covered. Thanks in advance for subscribing and sharing with your training gym owner friends. My mission is to get this content out to every gym owner in the world. So your help means so much to me. Remember, that's markfisheryoutube.com. See you there.